Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today I want to start with a little scenario. I'm going to describe a morning routine, and I want you to be honest with me and, honest with yourself about whether this sounds a bit too familiar.
I'm already a little nervous.
Well, you probably should be. Okay, so set the scene. It's 6:45 a.m., the alarm goes off on your phone, you roll over, you turn off the alarm, but you don't actually get up. You stay horizontal,
Right.
and your thumb, almost like it has a mind of its own entirely, just hovers over that colorful little icon. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's X, maybe it's your work email, and you click.
And the doom scroll begins.
The doom scroll completely begins. You check the weather, you see what your friends did last night, you read some headline about the economy that instantly raises your blood pressure, you check your work Slack, and suddenly you look at the time, and it's 7:25.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have been awake for 40 minutes. You haven't even moved your legs out of the bed, but your brain has already processed more data than a medieval peasant processed in a whole month.
It really is the modern condition, isn't it? I mean, we load the software before we've even booted up the hardware.
Exactly. And then, the day just continues like that. You make the coffee, you sit at the desk, you answer the emails, you drive home, and then you have that moment at maybe 8 p.m. where you sit on the couch and you think to yourself, wait, what actually happened today?
It's a total blur. It's that feeling of having been really busy, but not necessarily having been present for any of it.
And that exact feeling is the centerpiece of what we are talking about today. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of research centered around the English Leap materials.
Right, which is such a unique source.
It is. For those who don't know, English Leap is this unique platform where, on the surface, it's about learning English. So vocabulary, idioms, phrasing. But the actual vehicle they use to teach that language is deep psychological self-improvement.
Which is a brilliant Trojan horse, if you think about it. I mean, you come for the grammar lessons, but you end up staying for the existential crisis.
Essentially, yes. And in the material we are breaking down today, they drop a statistic right at the beginning that honestly, I had to pause and verify it myself. I really thought it was hyperbole.
Oh, I know the exact one you're looking at. It's the 95% statistic.
It is the 95% statistic. They claim, and this is completely backed by cognitive psychologists, that by the time we reach the age of 35, 95% of our thoughts, our emotional reactions, and our behaviors are entirely unconscious habits.
95%.
Just really look at that number. That leaves 5%.
Yeah.
That means for every hour you are actually awake, you are only actively steering the ship for about 3 minutes.
Correct.
The rest is just a pre-written script playing out.
It is genuinely terrifying when you first hear it, but when you dig into the biology, the neuroscience of it, it makes perfect sense. We are basically efficiency machines. We're biologically designed to offload cognitive effort wherever we can.
Right, because thinking is expensive.
Exactly. It burns a lot of calories. If you had to consciously think about how to tie your shoes, how to drive your car, how to interact with your boss, how to make your coffee every single time you did it, you would be completely exhausted by 9:00 a.m.
So the brain just automates it all.
It automates it. It creates a subroutine. And the source material actually uses a specific phrase here that I think is the first key vocabulary term we really need to lock in today, which is running on autopilot.
Running on autopilot, which is an aviation term, obviously.
Right. In a plane, the pilot is there, sitting in the cockpit, sure. But the computer is making all the tiny micro adjustments to keep the plane level. In our lives, we are in the cockpit, but the autopilot, which is largely the basal ganglia in the brain, is the thing actually flying the plane.
And the massive problem this deep dive addresses is what happens if the autopilot is programmed to fly right into a mountain?
Then you have a very big problem, because that 95% is actively working against you. And that brings us to the real core question of this entire analysis. Are we in control of our habits, or are our habits controlling us?
It's essentially the question of free will, just wrapped up in a habit tracker.
It really is. But the mission today isn't just to depress everyone with the reality that they are biological robots running on old software.
Well, thank goodness for that.
The goal here is to figure out how to actually break into that cockpit and reprogram the flight computer. The source calls this rewiring the brain. And I want to be really clear about the tone here, because this isn't manifesting. This isn't the secret.
We aren't just going to tell people to think positive thoughts and hope for the best.
No, absolutely not. This is about mechanics. It's about biology. It's about how neurons literally connect and disconnect from each other. The goal is to move you, the listener, from being a passive passenger to being, and I really love this phrase from the text, the architect of your own mind.
The architect. I like that because it implies planning. It implies having actual blueprints.
And it implies that you can tear walls down if you don't like where they are.
Right. But before we start tearing down walls, we need to understand the building materials. We need to talk about the hardware. Because I grew up, and I think a huge portion of our listeners did too, with this idea that the brain is like, well, it's like concrete.
Ah, yes. The wet cement theory.
Exactly. When you're a kid, the cement is wet. You can learn languages easily. You can learn to play instruments. You can change your personality. But then you hit 25, the prefrontal cortex finishes developing, the cement dries, and that's it. Good luck. You are who you are.
That is what the source calls the hardwired myth. And honestly, it is probably the most damaging misconception in the entire history of popular psychology.
Why so damaging, specifically?
Because it hands you a permanent excuse. If you believe your brain is hardwired, then saying, I'm just an anxious person or I'm just bad at learning languages isn't a complaint anymore. It becomes a medical diagnosis.
It absolves you of any responsibility to actually try and change it.
Exactly. But the science completely exploded this rigid view about 30 years ago. The source material leans heavily on this concept of neuroplasticity.
Let's break that word down for everyone.
Sure. So neuro, referring to neurons, which are the nerve cells in your brain, and plasticity, meaning plastic, moldable, changeable, not rigid at all. The brain isn't a computer chip that gets printed once at the factory. It's living tissue. It is constantly reorganizing itself based on whatever input you give it.
And the source uses a metaphor here that I found so much more helpful than the standard computer analogies. They compare the brain to a living garden.
Yes, this is a fantastic way to visualize it. So if you strip away the skull and the gray matter for a second, just imagine a dense, overgrown garden. In this analogy, the neurons and the synaptic connections between them, those are the plants.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Every single time you think a thought, every time you take an action, or even just feel an emotion, you are essentially watering a specific plant. You are planting a seed in that dirt.
So if I sit down and spend an hour practicing English vocabulary,
you are watering the language learning tree. You are literally strengthening those specific neural connections. The roots go a little deeper, the branches get a little wider.
But the garden analogy has a pretty scary side to it, doesn't it? Because gardens don't just grow beautiful flowers.
No, they grow weeds. And this is the critical part that people always miss about neuroplasticity. We tend to use the word neuroplasticity as a synonym for learning good things or self-improvement. But neuroplasticity itself is totally neutral. It's agnostic.
Doesn't care about your morals or your 5-year goals.
Not at all. If you spend 3 hours a day doom scrolling and worrying about things you cannot control, your brain looks at that activity and says, oh, wow, we are doing a lot of worrying today. This must be a critical survival skill. I need to get better at this.
It actually optimizes for the anxiety.
It does. It builds a superhighway for anxiety. It strengthens those specific connections so that the next time a minor trigger happens, you can worry even faster and more efficiently than you did before. Those are the weeds. Self-doubt, procrastination, fear. They are all seeds we plant and water with our own attention.
So that 95% figure we talked about, that autopilot, that's really just the garden that we've allowed to grow completely unchecked over the last 10 or 20 years.
That's the overgrowth. And if you aren't an active gardener, if you aren't, as the source emphasizes, intentional, then the weeds will simply take over because they are aggressive. The default state of an untended garden isn't a peaceful Zen rock garden. It's a chaotic jungle.
That is a very sobering thought. The idea that the garden grows whether you watch it or not. It completely removes the option of neutrality. You are either actively building a brain you want, or you are passively building a brain you don't want.
Precisely. You are always sculpting. The only question is, are you using a chisel with intent, or are you just letting the wind and the rain erode you?
Okay, so we obviously want to pick up the chisel. We want to clear the weeds. And here's where the rubber meets the road. And frankly, here's where I usually fail.
Go on. Let's hear it.
So I get motivated. I listen to a deep dive like this. I get all fired up. I say, tomorrow I'm going to be the architect. I buy a brand new journal. I download the language app. I set my alarm for 5:00 a.m.
Ah, the classic New Year's resolution energy.
Exactly. And I do it for maybe 3 days. I'm strong for 3 days. But on day 4, it's raining outside. I'm tired. The bed is incredibly warm. And I just think to myself, I'm just not feeling it today. I'll wait until I feel motivated again.
And right there, you have walked right into the trap. The Source material actually spends a lot of time dissecting this exact moment. They call it the motivation trap.
But it feels so logical in the moment. I tell myself I shouldn't force it. I should wait for real inspiration.
That logic is exactly why most people never change their lives. This source presents a biological principle that flips this entirely on its head. They argue that action comes first and motivation follows.
Let's keep going with that. Because socially, we are taught the exact opposite. Every movie, every commercial teaches us that motivation is the fuel that creates the action.
That's the intuitive view, right? I feel energetic, therefore I go for a run. But the biological loop actually runs in the complete opposite direction. I go for a run, my body releases dopamine and endorphins, and therefore I feel energetic.
You have to prime the pump yourself.
You have to light the match. The source uses the campfire analogy here, which is perfect. Imagine you are freezing cold out in the woods. You have a pile of wood in front of you. You don't stand in front of that wood and scream, "Give me heat! Once I'm warm, I'll light a fire."
That would be a very short, very sad camping trip.
Freeze to death. But that is exactly what we do with our goals. We sit at our desk totally freezing cold in terms of creativity or energy, saying, "Make me feel inspired, and then I'll write the essay." No. You have to strike the match. You have to take the action while you're still cold to create the heat.
So the physical action is the spark.
The action is the signal to the brain. When you force yourself to do the thing, even when you feel sluggish, even when you really just want to stay under the covers, your brain registers that. It goes, wait a minute, the boss is moving the body. The boss is opening the textbook. This is actually happening.
And then the chemistry kicks in.
The brain releases dopamine to reward the behavior you are engaging in. Motivation isn't a prerequisite for starting. It's a byproduct of starting.
You know, that's actually really liberating.
It is, isn't it?
Because it means I don't have to fix my feelings before I fix my life. I can feel tired, I can feel grumpy, I can feel incredibly lazy, and I can still just do the thing anyway.
You can act your way into a new way of thinking much faster than you can ever think your way into a new way of acting.
The source suggests a specific mental shift here to help with this. A way to basically talk to yourself in that moment of resistance. They call it flipping the script.
Right. And flipping the script is a great English idiom to know. It comes from the movie industry, taking the screenplay and changing the ending or reversing the roles. In this context, it means catching your internal monologue in the act. When that little voice says, "I'm not ready," you flip the script and you say out loud, "I don't need to be ready. I just need to start."
It sounds almost too simple, but I actually tried this yesterday after reading the prep notes for this deep dive. I really didn't want to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes. And finally, I just said, okay, I don't have to have a great workout. I don't even have to sweat. I just have to walk through the front door of the building.
And what happened?
I walked through the door.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, I was on the treadmill and I was totally fine. The dread completely vanished.
Because the dread was just the resistance of the autopilot trying to keep you on the old familiar path. Once you broke the physical inertia, your brain adjusted to the new reality.
So we've busted the myth that we are hardwired. We know we are gardeners. We know we have to light the match and not wait around for the heat. But now we really need to get into the mechanics. How does a single action, repeated over time, actually turn into that steel trap of a permanent habit?
This is where we go from light gardening to heavy industrial construction. We need to talk about the train tracks.
I love this imagery from the source. But before we get to the actual tracks, there is a famous phrase in neuroscience that the source quotes. Neurons that fire together.
Wire together. It rhymes, so you know it has to be true.
But what does it actually mean physically in the brain?
It refers to synaptic transmission. When you do something, let's say you're practicing a new English card, idiom chemicals jump across the tiny gap between two neurons in your brain. That's the firing.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you do it just once, it's a very weak connection. It's like a spider web. It breaks easily, which is why you forget a word you only looked up once. But if you do it again and again and again, the brain starts to literally coat that specific connection in a fatty substance called myelin.
Myelin, that's like the insulation, right?
Exactly. Think of myelin as the rubber insulation on an electrical wire. It stops the signal from leaking out, and it makes the electrical charge move faster, a lot faster, up to 100 times faster.
So this is where the train tracks analogy comes in.
Yes. Laying down a new habit is like trying to hack a path through a dense jungle with a dull machete. It's incredibly slow, it's exhausting, you get scratched up, and you want to quit. That's doing a task with low myelination.
That's the first week of going to the gym? Or the first week of trying to wake up an hour earlier?
Right. It takes all your willpower, but every time you walk that exact same path, you tramp down the grass a little more. Eventually, you clear enough space to lay down some gravel. Then you lay down wooden ties. Then eventually, steel rails. Once the rails are down, meaning once the circuit is fully myelinated, the train can glide over it at 200 miles per hour with almost zero energy expenditure.
And that's when the behavior becomes second nature.
That's the 95%. That's the autopilot taking over. The brain absolutely loves the train tracks because they are incredibly energy efficient. It will always choose the path of least resistance.
This explains so clearly why breaking a bad habit is so incredibly hard. You are trying to bushwhack through the jungle while there is a perfectly good, fully paved high-speed rail line right next to you that goes straight to Eat a Donut station.
Exactly. The train naturally wants to go there because there's no friction.
So when the source talks about identity sculpting, which is another major concept here, we are basically talking about being the construction foreman who decides exactly where the new tracks are going to go.
Yes. And this is a profound psychological shift. Habits aren't just things you do. They are actually evidence of who you are. The source makes a really beautiful point here. You are not trying to quit smoking. You are becoming a non-smoker. You aren't trying to learn English. You are becoming a fluent speaker.
That distinction seems subtle on paper, but it feels really heavy in practice.
It's a massive difference because every small action you take is a vote for that new identity, even just 5 minutes a day. The source heavily emphasizes this. You don't need to do a massive life overhaul. You just need to lay 5 minutes of track today, and then 5 minutes tomorrow.
Small hinges swing big doors.
Precisely. You are installing new mental software, and eventually the brain catches up. And catch up is another great phrasal verb from the text. The brain looks at your behavior and realizes, oh, I guess we are a runner now. Okay, let me build the permanent tracks for running so this gets easier.
But, and I think this is a huge but, you cannot build those tracks if you don't have the materials or the resources. And the most limited resource in the human brain isn't intelligence.
No, it's attention.
The currency of attention.
They call it a spotlight in the text.
Let's get into the spotlight analogy because it's so relevant right now.
Yes. Attention is like a spotlight in a pitch-dark room. Whatever you shine that light on, you see, you experience it. Whatever is in the dark effectively does not exist for you in that moment.
And the fundamental biological rule is, whatever the spotlight stays on, the brain builds tracks for.
Where your focus goes, your brain grows.
So, let's critically look at the modern spotlight.
Yeah.
Because my attention span feels less like a steady, focused beam and more like a chaotic strobe light at a rave.
That is what the text calls the scattered attention model. And it is an absolute disaster for neuroplasticity.
Why is it a disaster? I thought multitasking was supposed to be a skill.
Because building those tracks, that whole myelination process we just talked about, requires a sustained, uninterrupted signal. If you shine the spotlight on your work for 30 seconds, then immediately shine it on a phone notification, then on an email, then back to work for a minute, then to a news website, you are sending a fractured, broken signal to the brain.
The construction crew down there doesn't know what they're supposed to be building.
Exactly. They're completely confused. Are we building the work track or the email track? You are wiring your brain for what the source calls shallow thinking and scattered energy. And here's the truly scary part about that. If you do this every day for years, you physically alter your brain structure to be less capable of deep focus. You literally lose the capacity for it.
So multitasking isn't just inefficient in the moment, it's actively damaging your hardware long term.
You are training for distraction. You are becoming a black belt in getting distracted.
I feel incredibly attacked right now.
We all are. The entire modern digital economy is perfectly designed to steal your spotlight.
So what is the actual fix here?
The recommendation from the research is to treat your attention like a finite, precious resource. Don't just passively consume content. Engage with it. Reflect on it. When you're doing a task, keep the spotlight locked on that task. Signal to the brain loud and clear. This matters. Build tracks here.
And this leads us perfectly into the biggest spotlight stealer of all time. The thing that hijacks our attention faster and more violently than any app or notification.
Emotion.
Section 5 of the dive. Emotional loops. This part of the material really hit me hard because it explains how a totally temporary feeling can slowly harden into a permanent personality.
It's the glue theory. Emotions act as biological glue for memory and identity. You vividly remember your wedding day or a major car accident, but you don't remember what you had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. The intense emotion is what locks the memory into the architecture.
But the source outlines a specific progression here regarding negative emotions that is really eye-opening. It all starts with an emotional response.
Right. Let's say you get a really annoying passive-aggressive email from a coworker. You feel a flash of irritation. That's the spark. And that spark is totally normal and unavoidable.
Okay, so step one is just the raw response.
But if you keep your spotlight locked on that irritation, if you replay the email in your head while you're driving, while you're making dinner, the chemical reaction in your brain continues. It doesn't fade. And then it becomes a mood. Oh, don't talk to Steve right now. He's in a mood.
We've all been Steve.
Definitely. Now, if that mood persists for days or weeks because you keep feeding it, it settles into a temperament.
And if it keeps going beyond that.
If you carry that exact same temperament for months or even years, it literally becomes a permanent personality trait.
Wow, so I am annoyed by this specific email can actually eventually turn into I am a bitter, angry person.
Exactly. The brain wires a myelinated shortcut straight to that feeling. It says, well, we seem to be angry a lot. Let's just make anger the default operating system so we don't have to work so hard to get there.
And then you are completely on emotional autopilot. A minor trigger happens and you explode before you even consciously think about it.
Because the high-speed tracks are already laid down.
So how do we stop the train? How do we stop a bad morning from snowballing into a bad life?
The source introduces a very specific technical term here, the refractory period.
It sounds scientific. What does it actually mean in practice?
In simple terms, it is your recovery time. It's how long it takes your nervous system to return to a calm baseline after an emotional spike.
Okay, that makes sense.
The goal here isn't to be a numb robot. You are going to feel anger. You are going to feel sadness. That's being human. The goal is to consciously shorten the refractory period.
Don't let the storm drag on for days.
Don't stew in it. That's the idiom the source analyzes, and it's perfect. Stewing in it. Imagine a piece of tough meat sitting in a slow cooker. The longer it sits in there, the more it absorbs all that flavor. If you sit in your anger, you are literally marinating your brain in toxic stress chemicals.
That's a very visceral image. I'm marinating in my own rage.
It's toxic to the body. The technique is to notice the emotion, feel it fully for a moment, and then intentionally redirect the spotlight to something else. Interrupt the pattern. Pause. Take a deep breath. Step away from the computer.
The core insight being that your emotions are just data. They aren't directives. You don't have to blindly follow them down the rabbit hole just because you feel them.
Right. You are the architect, not the weather. You can't stop the rain from falling, but you can certainly choose not to stand out in it for 4 hours.
Speaking of rain and storms, let's shift gears and talk about stress. Because usually, when we talk about wellness or rewiring the brain, the ultimate goal is to eliminate all stress. We all want to be Zen monks floating on a stress-free cloud.
But the source firmly disagrees with that approach. They argue that stress is actually a crucial tool for growth.
This is a major reframe. They are busting the myth that all stress is inherently bad for you.
Right. They draw a very hard line between two types of stress. There is good stress, which is acute, short-term stress.
Give me a real-world example of good stress.
Public speaking, taking a freezing cold shower, doing a really high-intensity interval workout, or even just trying to speak a new language to a native speaker when you're terrified of making a mistake.
All terrifying things, but short-lived.
Short bursts of high intensity. This sends a massive signal to the brain. Wake up. The environment is demanding something from us. We need to adapt. We need to build stronger tracks.
It's the gym principle applied to the mind. You have to tear the muscle fibers to build them back stronger.
Exactly. But then there is the bad stress, chronic stress.
The slow, endless burn.
The background radiation of modern anxiety, the unread emails piling up, the lingering financial worries, the constant 24/7 news cycle. This puts the brain in a low-grade emergency mode constantly.
The source uses the fireplace analogy to explain the difference here, right?
Yes, and it's brilliant. Controlled acute stress is like a fire safely contained inside a fireplace. It warms the house, it provides energy, it's incredibly useful.
But uncontrolled chronic stress is the fire jumping out of the grate and catching the living room rug on fire.
And eventually burning the entire house down to the foundation.
The key distinction, though, and the thing I think almost all high achievers completely miss, is the recovery phase.
You cannot have the stress without the recovery. It's biologically impossible to sustain. If you go to the gym and lift weights for 24 hours straight, you don't get super strong, you die.
Your body breaks down.
You break. You need the silence. You need the literal physical space to integrate the growth that the stress triggered. Which leads us, inescapably, to the single most underrated tool in the architect's tool belt.
One tool that almost all of us actively choose to skip.
The superpower of sleep.
Section 7. I feel like every single health podcast or article says sleep is important, and we all politely nod and say, yeah, I know, and then we stay up until 1 a.m. watching Netflix anyway.
We treat sleep like it's a tax we have to pay to the body. Or worse, in certain corporate cultures, we treat it like a weakness. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
That whole hustle culture mindset.
But the source is totally brutal about this. They say skipping sleep to get more done is like planting an expensive garden and then never watering it.
Nothing is going to take root.
Nothing takes root because, and this connects directly back to the train tracks we discussed, the actual physical wiring of the brain happens almost entirely while you sleep.
Walk us through the night shift. What is the brain actually doing when we are, as the idiom goes, under the covers?
It activates a literal construction crew. When you lose consciousness, your brain absolutely does not turn off. It just shifts gears. It takes all the raw experiences of the day, the new French words you studied, the piano scales you practiced, the problem you solved at work, and it replays them at high speed.
It rehearses the day.
It rehearses. And while it rehearses, it pours the concrete. It releases the specific chemicals that solidify those new neural connections. That is exactly how it locks in the learning.
So if I study intensely all day and then only sleep for 4 hours,
you lose a massive percentage of that effort. You put in all the hard work, but you didn't let the system save the file.
that is incredibly painful to hear for anyone who pulled all-nighters in college. But there is a second major function of the construction crew during sleep, right?
Yes, the cleaning crew. And this is arguably even more important for mental health. They prune away the connections that don't matter.
Pruning, like trimming back a bonsai tree.
Yes. Your brain accumulates so much absolute junk during the waking hours. Random overheard conversations, the color of a billboard you passed on the highway, a catchy jingle from a commercial. If you kept all that data permanently, your brain would be completely overwhelmed with noise.
Total clutter.
So during deep sleep, the brain cells literally shrink slightly to allow cerebrospinal fluid to wash away metabolic waste, and it chemically snips the weak, unimportant connections. It clears the cache.
So sleep isn't just passive rest. It's active, aggressive curation. It's the brain deciding what to keep for tomorrow and what to permanently delete.
Exactly. The source specifically calls sleep underrated because it is the non-negotiable foundation of everything else we've talked about. You cannot focus your spotlight, you cannot regulate your emotional loops, and you cannot lay down new habit tracks if you aren't letting the construction crew do their job at night.
So the new motto is, sleep isn't laziness, it's biology hard at work.
It is quite literally the most productive thing you do all day.
I am definitely going to tell my boss that tomorrow morning, when I'm inevitably late to the meeting, I was being highly productive, sir. I was pruning my synapses.
I was engaging in strategic neural architecture. Please don't interrupt.
Exactly. So we have covered a massive amount of ground here today. We've gone from the overgrown garden to the cold campfire to laying down the train tracks, focusing the spotlight, and finally letting the construction crew work.
It's a complete interconnected ecosystem.
And before we fully wrap up, I want to briefly loop back to the linguistic layer of this source material. We've been using these specific English terms throughout the conversation, but I want to spotlight just how useful they are as a psychological toolkit.
They really are. There's a concept in psychology that when you finally have a name for something, you gain power over it, you can control it.
Take run on autopilot, for instance.
Right. Just knowing that specific phrase allows you to catch yourself in the act. You can be scrolling on your phone and suddenly say, whoops, I'm on autopilot right now. That simple awareness is the crucial first step to taking the controls back.
Or the phrases flip the switch or flip the script.
Using those idioms gives you a sudden sense of agency. It immediately reminds you that you can intervene in your own life. You aren't helpless to your moods.
What about bust the myth?
That's all about challenging your own deeply held limiting beliefs. When you say, I can't learn a language at my age, you can use that phrase to pause and say, wait, is that true? No, that's a myth and I need to bust it.
And stewing in it.
That might be my favorite one. It's such a gross, vivid image. It actively stops you from indulging in a bad mood because you visualize yourself rotting away in a pot of hot water. It makes you want to get out.
Run away.
That reminds us that personal growth isn't always about adding more things to our to-do list. Growth is often about subtraction, removing the noise, letting things go.
And finally, intentional.
The ultimate antidote to the autopilot.
It really is amazing how language physically shapes thought. If you don't have the vocabulary word for neuroplasticity, you just assume you're permanently stuck. But if you have the word, suddenly you see endless possibility.
Language is the operating system of the mind. If you upgrade your vocabulary, you automatically upgrade your thinking.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for the listener. We started with the frankly terrifying realization that 95% of our life is completely unconscious. We're just passengers.
But we learned that the brain is a living garden, and more importantly, we are the gardeners.
We learned that we can't just sit around waiting for motivation to strike. We have to strike the match ourselves.
We learned that habits are actual physical structures in the brain train tracks that we build slowly with repetition and focused attention.
We learned that we have to aggressively protect our spotlight from the scattered noise of the modern world.
We learned to shorten our emotional refractory periods so we don't accidentally let a fleeting bad mood define our entire personality.
We reframe stress as a fire that can either warm our house or completely burn it down, depending on how we manage recovery.
And we learned to respect sleep as the critical time when the real neurological building actually happens.
It is a totally interconnected system. Action starts the process, habits sustain it, focus directs it, emotional control protects it, and sleep cements it.
Moving from passenger to architect.
That is the ultimate transformation here.
And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens one tiny myelinated connection at a time.
So to you, our listener right now, the call to action from our source material is actually very simple today. Don't just passively consume this deep dive. Don't let this be just another interesting input that gets pruned away by your brain tonight.
Engage with it. Start really small, light the match, even if it is just deciding to go to bed 30 minutes earlier tonight to give your construction crew more time, or even if it's just deciding to take one conscious deep breath the next time you feel a flash of anger at an email.
There is a final, really provocative thought from the source that I want to leave everyone with. It's something to just mull over as you go about the rest of your day. They emphasize over and over that your brain changes based exclusively on what you feed it, period.
Right. It's a biological rule.
So if you are the architect of your mind and your daily attention is the blueprint, what kind of structure are you building right now in this very second?
That is the ultimate question.
Yeah.
Because every single second you focus your spotlight on something, you are sending a clear signal to your brain. Let's build this.
So take a hard look at what you are doing today. Look at what you are obsessively thinking about and ask yourself, is this the house I actually want to live in?
Very powerful.
Thank you for diving deep with us today. Go